Hello again and welcome to All 24 News World News Program. Next up are the headlines. Big step forward. Algeria and Chad just signed 27 new deals and a strong political pact kicking off a new era of cooperation. On the world stage, Algeria pushes for Africa to get 7 UN Security Council seats, 2 of them permanent, and is now seen as a key player in global energy by Latin America. Trump extends the ceasefire in the war with Iran, talks up an excellent deal with Tehran while keeping the military blockade. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps vows an immediate and decisive response if the US strikes again. Welcome back. First up in our news tonight, the fourth session of the Algerian-Chadian Joint Cooperation Committee concluded Monday in Algiers. In his closing remarks, Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf welcomed positive and encouraging outcomes aimed at revitalizing cooperation across all sectors. He announced agreement on the creation of a bilateral political consultation mechanism and a joint business council, noting that 27 new draft agreements are nearing completion, marking a significant step in bilateral relations.
فالعلاقات الجزائرية تشادية تستمد جذورها.
Algerian-Chadian relations go back to our shared struggle against the same colonial power and the sacrifices both our brotherly peoples made for freedom and independence. They draw their strength from our common ambition to turn the Sahel-Saharan region into a space of peace, security, development and prosperity. And they are defined by our strong alignment in support of African unity, along with our firm commitment to solidarity, cooperation and integration across the continent.
At the event, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf said bilateral ties are getting a boost thanks to a direct air link and major strategic infrastructure projects.
إن المسؤولية الملقاة على عاتقنا.
The direct air link between Algiers and N'Djamena has been a real success, now operating 4 flights a week. At the same time, we should fully seize the opportunities offered by the African Continental Free Trade Area to deepen cooperation, not just between our 2 countries, but with the rest of Africa as well. Another key priority is improving connectivity between our 2 nations by accelerating major infrastructure projects launched by Algeria. At the forefront is the Trans-Saharan Highway, along with its fiber optic network, projects that can become a strategic economic corridor, boosting joint development and opening up the Sahel-Saharan region, especially Chad.
Similarly, Minister Attaf said this new phase in the Algerian-Chadian relations aims to open new horizons by bringing the 2 peoples closer around shared interests.
لا أجد خير ما أختتم به مداخلة هاته.
Let me conclude by reaffirming our strong belief that Algerian-Chadian relations are about to enter a new phase, opening up unprecedented opportunities in both scope and substance. A new chapter that brings our peoples closer together, a chapter that gives fresh momentum to our shared interests, a chapter that benefits both our nations and our brotherly peoples, and a chapter that strengthens our joint contribution to development and stability in our region and across Africa.
For his part, Chad's Foreign Minister Abdullah Saber Fadel reaffirmed N'Djamena's readiness to elevate ties with Algeria into a model of strategic partnership built on continuity, commitment and responsibility. Speaking at the 4th session of the Algerian-Chadian Joint Cooperation Committee, he described Algeria as a key partner in Chad's development and across the Sahel-Saharan region.
Le Tchad demeure convaincu que l'Algérie
Chad firmly believes that Algeria, with its experience, industrial capacity, and strong commitment to Africa, is a key partner in supporting our development efforts, as well as those of the entire Sahel and Sahara region. I'm confident that the spirit of brotherhood, trust, and mutual respect that defines relations between Chad and Algeria will continue to guide our exchanges and further strengthen our strategic partnership. I also reaffirm the full readiness of the Chadian government to work closely with the Algerian side to make this cooperation a model of successful partnership, one that is strategic and built on continuity, commitment, and responsibility.
Chad's foreign minister stressed the need to anchor Algerian-Chadian cooperation in a broader vision, one that builds an interconnected, secure and economically integrated Sahel-Saharan space, positioning Africa as a central player in global shifts.
C'est une vision que nous devons
What we need to embrace is a comprehensive vision, a vision for a connected, secure, and economically integrated Saharo-Sahelian space, a vision for an Africa that is no longer on the margins, but that stands as a central actor in global transformations. In this context, strengthening the links between our two countries is not a luxury. It is a strategic necessity. Roads, trade corridors, and air connections and concrete tools for integration. Without them, our ambitions will remain only theoretical.
The Chadian foreign minister called for a strategic partnership and real integration with Algeria, strengthening both countries' capacity to face security threats, economic shocks, and external pressures.
C'est un signal.
The reactivation of this joint committee between our two countries reflects a clear determination, to place cooperation between Chad and Algeria within a framework of strength, sovereignty, and concrete result. The relationship between Chad and Algeria can no longer be limited to historical solidarity, as important as that is. It must now evolve into a true strategic partnership, one built on a real integration, capable of generating added value and strengthening our collective ability to face security threats, economic shocks, and external pressures in the Sahara region, marked by instability, rising terrorism, illicit trafficking, and competing influences. Chad and Algeria carry a special responsibility to act together.
At the Algerian-Chadian Business Forum in Algiers, participants affirmed a shared commitment, lift economic ties to a strategic partnership. Algeria's Trade Minister Kamel Rizieq told the forum trade must better reflect the strength of bilateral relations. He called Chad a promising African market, one ready to absorb Algeria's non-hydrocarbon growth.
A look
at our trade figures clearly shows a striking gap between the vast potential of our fraternal ties and the level of exchange we have actually achieved. While it is true that trade between Algeria and Chad has steadily grown, reaching $1.85 million in 2024, this remains modest compared to the capabilities and potential of both countries. Our non-hydrocarbon exports have tripled since 2017 and continue to rise. The objective is clear and ambitious, to reach $10 billion in non-hydrocarbon export, as announced by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune. This gives us confidence that the Chadian market is one of the promising African destinations, capable of playing a meaningful role in this growth.
Meanwhile, Chad's Trade and Industry Minister Matthew Bolofanga called for stronger economic ties and a strategic partnership with Algeria, aligned with both countries' ambitions and aimed at advancing a broader, integrated regional vision.
L'Algérie et le Tchad, il ne s'agit pas seulement de renforcer une relation.
We reaffirm our shared commitment to strengthening economic relations between our two countries and elevating them to a genuine strategic partnership that reflects the aspirations of Algeria and Chad. This partnership should go beyond traditional bilateral cooperation and extend toward building a comprehensive regional framework based on economic integration and mutual benefit. We see in this effort a promising opportunity to develop economic corridors and infrastructure linking North Africa with its central and western regions. I would also like to take this opportunity to commend the strength and resilience of the Algerian economy, which is experiencing tangible progress and stands as a model for the region, both in diversifying its economic base and improving its investment climate.
And as you followed in our headlines, Algeria renewed its call for Africa to secure 7 seats on the UN Security Council, including 2 permanent seats with full veto power. Speaking at the intergovernmental talks on equitable representation, Algeria's UN representative Ammar Benjama urged correcting the historical injustice against the continent by meeting its legitimate demand for full membership. Benjama stressed that Africa's unified position is non-negotiable, calling for the continent to be treated as a special case in any Security Council reform.
Secondly, to enhance the representation of underrepresented regions and groups, we must adhere to both the letter and the spirit of the Charter for the Future, particularly paragraph A of Article 39. In this context, Africa must be treated as a special case in this reform process, meaning that the common African position must be fully and accurately taken into account. Put simply, these aspirations are a legitimate right for Africa. The common African position is non-negotiable, and Africa will not show any flexibility or make concessions at this stage of the reform process.
Algeria's permanent representative to the UN said Africa will engage in negotiations without an agreed framework that addresses historical injustice and expands Security Council membership.
Finally, let me reiterate Africa's position, which Algeria fully supports and endorses. On engaging in text-based negotiations, Africa will not participate in such negotiations unless prior agreement is reached among member states on the 5 thematic groups, and an agreed framework is established that addresses the issue of historical injustice, a matter on which there is broad consensus among us. This also requires the adoption of a reform model that clearly addresses the expansion of both categories of membership and the Security Council.
And at the UN Forum on Financing for Development in New York, Algerian Finance Minister Abdelkarim Bouzerd called for reforms to the global financial system. He said developing countries continue to bear disproportionate risks despite limited results and urged stronger representation in international decision-making. Bouzerd also highlighted Algeria's support for global solidarity, including debt relief and $100 billion or $1 billion development cooperation agency focused on Africa. We move on to a different, or we're still with Algeria's related news. Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune received on Tuesday Executive Secretary of the Latin American and Caribbean Energy Organization. The meeting was attended by Minister of State and Minister of Hydrocarbons Mohamed Arqab and Presidential Advisor for Diplomatic Affairs Ammar Abba, according to a statement from the presidency. On a related note, Algeria and the Latin American Caribbean Energy Organization have signed a new roadmap to strengthen cooperation in the energy sector. The agreement follows talks between Minister of State and Minister of Hydrocarbons Mohamed Arqab and Al-Saad Executive Secretary Andreas Ribollido. It sets a framework to boost joint projects, expand expertise, exchange in oil and gas, and support research, training, and development. The roadmap also promotes cooperation in renewable energy in line with global energy transition goals. Both sides said the agreement will enhance investment opportunities, technology transfer, and human capacity building within Algeria's push to expand South-South cooperation and strengthen energy security.
This meeting was crowned by the signing of a roadmap for cooperation between Algeria and Latin American and Caribbean Energy Organization, which represent an important step toward establishing a more structured and effective partnership based on concrete projects and defined cooperation programs. We are committed to developing practical and productive partnerships based on the exchange of expertise and experience, particularly in exploration, production, and resource valorization, as well as trade and research and development. Algeria reaffirms its commitment to strengthening international cooperation, especially within the framework of South-South cooperation, in a way that supports a fair and sustainable energy transition without compromising energy security.
Algeria has been a member of Latin American and Caribbean Energy Organization for 25 years, and today we're celebrating an important milestone through which we aim to strengthen relations between Algeria and our region. We seek to work together with a shared vision for the future, particularly regarding the technologies and challenges facing both Algeria and Latin America in a global context that places significant pressure on the energy sector, especially in light of the oil crisis and its impact on energy security in our countries. We're very pleased to renew this momentum of cooperation with a country that, as mentioned, has long been a member of our organization, and we look forward to deepening these ties in the energy field, where together we possess vast resources and strong potential for complementarity.
Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense and Chief of Staff of the Algerian Army General Said Chengriha described vital infrastructure as the lifeblood that sustains national security and stability. Speaking at a national forum on protecting strategic installations from emerging threats, he underscored the Army's key role in safeguarding critical sites through the dedicated protection and response plans. U.S. President Donald Trump said the United States is extending the ceasefire with Iran at Pakistan's request, while awaiting what he described as a unified proposal from Tehran. He said that U.S. forces will maintain a blockade of Iranian ports and remain on alert. Trump said he's optimistic about reaching a great deal with Iran before the Middle East ceasefire runs out.
They have no choice but to send them. What I think is that we're going to end up with a great deal. I think they have no choice. We've taken out their Navy. We've taken out their Air Force. We've taken out their leaders, frankly, which does complicate things in one way, but these leaders are much more rational. It is regime change, no matter what you want to call it, which is not something I said I was going to do, but I've done it, indirectly maybe, but I've done it. And I think we're in a very strong negotiating position to do what other presidents should have done during a 47-year period.
Pakistani media reported that Islamabad has received assurances from both the United States and Iran confirming their participation in a new round of talks scheduled for Wednesday. The Associated Press, citing Pakistani sources, said Iran's delegation will be led by Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, while U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance is expected to arrive in Islamabad early Wednesday. A Pakistani source said President Donald Trump may attend the Islamabad negotiations either in person or online if a deal with Iran comes together. Reuters reported Tuesday, citing a Pakistani source, that momentum is building for a second round of U.S.-Iranian talks to begin Wednesday. Trump wants an agreement that keeps oil prices and energy markets stable, but his bottom line remains that Iran cannot have the means to develop a nuclear weapon. Iran's Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf accused President Donald Trump of trying to turn the negotiating table into a table of surrender, using sanctions and ceasefire violations as cover to reignite war. In a post on X platform on Tuesday, Ghalibaf said Iran refuses to negotiate under pressure. He also warned that over the past 2 weeks, Tehran has been preparing to unveil new strategies on the battlefield.
Through imposing a blockade and violating the ceasefire, Trump seeks, under his illusions, to turn the negotiating table into a table of surrender or to justify reigniting the war. We do not accept negotiations under the shadow of threat, and over the past 2 weeks, we have prepared to reveal new cards on the battlefield.
A fragile ceasefire between the United States and Iran has been extended as talks intensify in Islamabad, with Washington pushing strict demands on Tehran's nuclear and missile programs, while Pakistani mediators work to prevent further escalation. More details now with Yasin Arkhti.
Global tensions has shifted to Islamabad, where high-stakes diplomacy is underway amid rising tensions between the United States and Iran. In a significant development, US President Donald Trump announced on Tuesday an extension of the current ceasefire, citing the need to allow time for Tehran to present a formal proposal and for negotiations to progress. Washington has already dispatched a delegation led by Vice President J.D. Vance, carrying a firm position from the White House. U.S. demands reportedly include a complete halt to Iran's nuclear program, the dismantling of its missile capabilities, and an end to its strategic influence over the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian officials have rejected these conditions, describing them as equivalent to capitulation. Tehran's participation in the talks remains uncertain. While Iranian leaders reject negotiations conducted under pressure, They have signaled openness to dialogue as a means of avoiding further escalation. Analysts say this reflects a calculated effort to maintain leverage while managing mounting external pressure. With Pakistani mediators intensifying back-channel diplomacy, the outcome remains unclear. Observers warn that failure could push the region closer to a dangerous tipping point.
Iran's top military commander Ali Abdullahi said his country's armed forces are ready to deliver an immediate and decisive response to any new aggression. Speaking to Tasnim news agency Tuesday, Abdullahi declared Tehran will keep the upper hand in the military arena, including control of the Strait of Hormuz. He dismissed President Trump's threats and vowed to retaliate in kind against any attack.
The Iranian armed forces are prepared to deliver an immediate, decisive, and effective response to any new hostile act by their adversaries. Tehran retains the upper hand on the military field, including control and management of the Strait of Hormuz. We will not allow the US president to create a false narrative about the situation on the ground, particularly in light of the ongoing military standoff and our control over the Strait of Hormuz.
US President Donald Trump accused Iran of violating the ceasefire agreement, saying Tehran had breached the truce numerous times since it came into effect. In a brief post on Truth Social on Tuesday, he said the violations were repeated without providing further details. The Pentagon confirmed 13 American soldiers died during the recent war with Iran. In a statement on Tuesday, the Department of War also said 415 U.S. troops were wounded in the Operation Epic Fury against Iran. Tehran announced that an Iranian oil tanker crossed into its territorial waters on Tuesday night with support from the Army's naval forces. The Iranian Army said the tanker Sili City entered safely despite repeated warnings and threats from the U.S. Navy, adding that it has since docked at a southern Iranian port. Turning to other news now, the United Nations reported that at least 177 children were killed and more than 700 others injured in the latest Zionist bombardment of Lebanon. U.S. Secretary General spokesperson Stefan Dujarric said in a press briefing on Monday that over 350,000 people have been displaced, adding that many are facing extremely difficult conditions with limited access to basic services. 8 Palestinians, including 2 women and a child, were killed on Tuesday in occupation strikes across the Gaza Strip. Medical sources, cited by the Palestinian Information Center, said a child was killed in Jabalia refugee camp, while 2 women died in strikes targeting tents housing displaced people in an Atatra camp in the north, and in the Rafah area in the south. 5 others were killed in airstrikes on Khan Yunis and amid the continued violations of the ceasefire agreement. Still in occupied Palestine, 4 Palestinians, including 2 children and a woman, were killed and 4 others wounded in Zionist occupation forces and settler attacks in the occupied West Bank. The Palestinian news agency reported that a settler attack on a school east of Ramallah left 2 Palestinians dead, including a student, and injured 4 others. In Al-Khalil, a child was killed after being run over by a Zionist settler in Beit Ainun. Separately, a woman died after succumbing to brain injuries sustained during a previous Zionist raid on Jenin refugee camp. And that wraps up our news program for tonight. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.